I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, my hands trembling as I gripped the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines, positive. My heart raced as I tried to process this life-changing news. How would I tell Chris? As if on cue, I heard the front door open. "Nora? You home?" Chris called out. I quickly shoved the test into my pocket and splashed some water on my face. "In here," I managed to reply, my voice shakier than I'd intended. Chris appeared in the doorway, his face etched with worry. "Everything okay? You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just feeling a bit under the weather. How was your interview?" He ran a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of stress. "It was interesting. Can we talk?" We moved to the living room, settling onto our worn couch. Chris took a deep breath. "They offered me the job." "That's great news," I exclaimed, genuinely happy for him after a year of fruitless job hunting. His expression remained serious. "There's a catch, Nora. The position is in Seattle." My stomach dropped. "Seattle? But that's across the country. Our whole life is here, my art studio, our friends, your family." I know," Chris said, reaching for my hand, "but this is a fantastic opportunity. The salary is double what I was making before, and there's room for growth." I pulled away, standing up to pace the room. "What about my career? I've just started to build a name for myself in the local art scene." Chris's eyes pleaded with me. "You can paint anywhere, Nora, and with this salary, we could afford a house with a dedicated studio space for you." I felt torn. The pregnancy test weighed heavily in my pocket, a secret that would change everything. "I don't know, Chris. It's such a big decision." "We don't have to decide right this second," he said, his voice gentle, "but they need an answer by the end of the week." Just then, a cry erupted from the baby monitor. Our daughter, Lily, was awake from her nap. "I'll get her," Chris offered, standing up. As he left the room, I sank back onto the couch, my mind reeling. How could I uproot our entire life? But how could I ask Chris to turn down this opportunity after struggling for so long? When Chris returned with Lily, her chubby arms reached out for me. I took her, breathing in her sweet baby scent. "Mama sad?" Lily asked, her big blue eyes studying my face. I kissed her forehead. "No, sweetheart, Mama's just thinking." Chris sat beside us, his arm around my shoulders. "We're a team, Nora. Whatever we decide, we'll do it together." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. How could I tell him about the baby now? It would only complicate things further. "I have an idea," Chris said suddenly. "Why don't we take a drive to that little bed and breakfast we love? We can spend the weekend there, talk things through without any distractions." The thought of escaping, even for a couple of days, was tempting. "What about Lily?" "My mom's been begging for some grandma time. I'm sure she'd be thrilled to watch her." I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let's do it." As Chris made the arrangements, I excused myself to the bathroom. I pulled out the pregnancy test, staring at those 2 pink lines that had the power to change everything. How could I tell Chris now, with this job offer hanging over us? And how could I not? My mind raced with the possibilities, each scenario more daunting than the last. One thing was certain, this weekend getaway would be anything but relaxing. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving us standing in front of our new home in Seattle. Rain drizzled down, matching my mood perfectly. Chris squeezed my hand, his excitement palpable. "This is it, Nora, our fresh start." I forced a smile, my free hand resting on my now visible baby bump. "It's different." As we walked up the driveway, a voice called out, "Welcome to the neighborhood." A statuesque blonde in yoga pants jogged towards us, all smiles and bouncing ponytail. "I'm Angela, your next-door neighbor." Chris stepped forward, extending his hand. "Chris, this is my wife, Nora, and our daughter, Lily." Angela's eyes lingered on Chris a beat too long before turning to me. "Oh, and another one on the way. How exciting!" I nodded, suddenly feeling frumpy in my travel-worn clothes. "We're due in 4 months." "Well, if you need anything at all, I'm right next door," Angela said, her hand on Chris's arm. "Anything at all." As she jogged away, Chris chuckled. "Friendly neighbors. That's a good sign, right?" I mumbled agreement, but something about Angela's overly warm welcome left me uneasy. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of unpacking and settling in. Chris threw himself into his new job, often working late. I struggled to find my footing, missing my old art studio and friends. One afternoon, while Lily napped, a knock at the door startled me. It was Angela, holding a plate of cookies. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," she said, breezing past me into the kitchen. How are you settling in? I followed, feeling oddly defensive in my own home. Fine, thanks. Chris is loving his new job. Angela's eyes sparkled. Oh, I know. We had lunch yesterday. He's quite the charmer, isn't he? My stomach clenched. You had lunch? Just a quick bite in the cafeteria, she waved dismissively. Did he not mention it? Anyway, there's a neighborhood barbecue this weekend. You simply must come. After she left, I stood in the kitchen, Angela's words echoing in my mind. Why hadn't Chris mentioned lunch? That evening, as we ate dinner, I casually asked, How's work going? Meet any new people? Chris nodded, mouthful of pasta. It's great. Everyone's been really welcoming. I waited, but he didn't elaborate. Anyone in particular? He shrugged. Not really. Oh, did I mention there's a company picnic coming up? I set down my fork. Actually, Angela invited us to a neighborhood barbecue. Same day, probably. Chris's face lit up. Perfect. We can do both. The picnic's in the afternoon. We can hit the barbecue after. I pushed my food around my plate. You seem awfully excited about the barbecue. He reached across the table, taking my hand. I'm excited about making friends here, Nora. This move was hard on all of us. I want it to work. I nodded, guilt washing over me. Was I being paranoid? The barbecue arrived, and I found myself surrounded by Angela's friends. They were all impossibly fit, sipping wine and trading neighborhood gossip. Oh, Nora, one woman said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. It must be so hard being pregnant in a new city, and with Chris working such long hours. Another chimed in. At least he has Angela to keep him company at work. She's such a dear, always looking out for the new employees. My head snapped up. What do you mean? The women exchanged glances. Oh, nothing, dear. It's just nice that he has a friendly face at the office. I scanned the yard, spotting Chris and Angela by the grill, laughing at some private joke. As I watched, she placed her hand on his arm, leaning in close to whisper something. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What was really going on here? As we drove home that night, Chris chatted happily about the new friends we'd made. I stared out the window, my mind racing. Nora? You okay? Chris asked, concern in his voice. I turned to him, searching his face. Chris, is there something you're not telling me? Chris's face paled at my question. What do you mean? I've told you everything. I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. It's just... You and Angela seem awfully close. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Nora, she's just being friendly. You're reading too much into this. I let it drop, but sleep eluded me that night. The next morning, while Chris was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages. There it was, a thread with Angela. My heart raced as I opened it. Great seeing you today. Lunch again tomorrow? Absolutely. Same time, same place? Can't wait. You always brighten my day. I felt sick. The messages weren't explicitly romantic, but the familiarity, the frequency, it was all wrong. Chris's footsteps approached. I quickly put the phone down, my mind reeling. Hey, honey, he said, kissing my cheek. I'm heading out. Big presentation today. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Good luck, I managed to choke out. As soon as he left, I burst into tears. Lily toddled over, her little face scrunched with concern. Mama sad? I pulled her close, breathing in her sweet baby scent. No, sweetheart. Mama's okay. But I wasn't okay. Far from it. That afternoon, I took Lily to the park, desperate for a distraction. As she played in the sandbox, I sat on a nearby bench, lost in thought. Mind if I join you? I looked up to see an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair. Please, I gestured to the empty seat. I'm Marianne, she said, settling beside me. You look like you could use a friendly ear. Something about her warmth broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole story. The move, Angela, the text messages. Marianne listened without judgment, her eyes filled with understanding. When I finished, she took my hand. Oh, honey, I've been where you are. What did you do? I asked, desperate for guidance. She smiled sadly. I ignored it, convinced myself I was imagining things. Don't make my mistake, Nora. Trust your instincts. As we talked, Lily ran over, proudly showing off a handful of pebbles. Marianne's face lit up. What a beautiful collection. You must be so proud of your mommy. Lily beamed, then ran back to play. Marianne turned to me, her expression serious. Whatever you decide to do, remember, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for her, too. Her words struck a chord. I thought of the baby growing inside me, of Lily's innocent face. They deserved better than this. But how can I be sure? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Marianne squeezed my hand. You dig deeper, gather evidence, and when you know for certain, you act. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, Chris's phone in my hands. He was working late again, or so he said. With trembling fingers, I opened his location history. My breath caught as I saw an unfamiliar address, visited multiple times over the past weeks. I grabbed my car keys, determination overriding my fear. It was time to see for myself. The address led me to a small apartment complex. As I pulled up, I saw Chris's car parked outside. My heart pounded as I approached the building. Through a ground-floor window, I saw them, Chris and Angela, sitting close on a couch, laughing over glasses of wine. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. It was real. It was all real. As I drove home, tears blurring my vision, one thought echoed in my mind. What am I going to do now? The annual company picnic loomed, and I dreaded every second of it. But I had to go. I needed to see Chris and Angela together with my own eyes. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything. As we arrived at the park, Chris squeezed my hand. You okay? You've been quiet lately. I forced a smile. Just tired. The pregnancy, you know. He nodded, distracted by something over my shoulder. Oh, there's Angela. I promised I'd help her set up the volleyball net. Before I could respond, he was gone, jogging towards that familiar blonde ponytail. I watched as they laughed together, their bodies in perfect sync as they worked. Mama, swing! Lily tugged at my hand, pulling me towards the playground. As I pushed Lily on the swing, my eyes never left Chris and Angela. They were always near each other, sharing private jokes, touching casually. It was like watching a dance I wasn't part of. Your husband seems close with Angela, a voice beside me said. It was one of the women from the neighborhood barbecue. I stiffened. They're just colleagues. She raised an eyebrow. If you say so, dear, but if I were you, I'd keep a closer eye on them. Anger flared in my chest. How dare she? But as I opened my mouth to retort, I realized she was right. I needed to know the truth, once and for all. As the afternoon wore on, I lost sight of Chris. Panic rose in my throat. Where was he? Where was Angela? Lisa, can you watch Lily for a minute? I asked another mom. I need to find Chris. I searched the crowded park, my heart pounding. Then I saw them, ducking behind a storage shed at the far end of the field. Without thinking, I followed. As I approached, I heard Angela's lilting laugh. Oh, Chris, you're terrible. You love it, Chris's voice replied, low and intimate. I peered around the corner of the shed, and my world shattered. Chris had Angela pressed against the wall, his lips on her neck, her hands tangled in his hair. A strangled gasp escaped me. They sprang apart, guilt written all over their faces. Nora? Chris exclaimed, his face pale. It's not. This isn't. But I was already running, tears blurring my vision. I heard Chris calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I found myself at the playground, scooping up a confused Lily. We're going home, baby, I choked out. But Daddy? She asked, looking around. Daddy's busy, I said, my voice breaking. As I buckled Lily into her car seat, Chris caught up to us. Nora, please, let me explain. I whirled on him, fury and pain coursing through me. Explain what, Chris? How you've been lying to me? How you've been sneaking around with her? He reached for me, but I jerked away. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. It was a mistake, he pleaded. It didn't mean anything. I love you, Nora. You and Lily are my world. I laughed bitterly. Your world? Is that why you've been spending every spare moment with her? Chris's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk about this? We can fix this. For a moment, I wavered. I thought of our life together, of Lily, of the baby on the way, but then I remembered the sight of him with Angela, and my resolve hardened. I don't know if we can fix this, Chris, I said, my voice cold. I don't know if I want to. As I drove away, leaving Chris standing alone in the parking lot, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. What would I do now? How would I tell Lily? Could I raise 2 children on my own? But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small voice whispered, You're stronger than you know. You can do this. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, a plan already forming in my mind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I hadn't slept in days. Chris's desperate calls and messages went unanswered as I grappled with the shattered pieces of my life. Lily's confused tears only deepened my anguish. How could I explain that Daddy wasn't coming home? One particularly rough morning, I found myself back at the park, hoping the fresh air might clear my head. Lily was with my mother, giving me a rare moment alone. "Nora?" a familiar voice called. It was Marianne, the kind older woman I'd met before. "Oh, honey, you look like you've been through hell." The sympathy in her eyes broke something in me. Before I knew it, I was sobbing, pouring out the whole sordid story between gasps. Marianne listened, her face a mix of compassion and anger. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "You're stronger than you realize, Nora, but you need to be smart about this." "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping my eyes. She leaned in, her voice low. "Men like Chris, they're good at spinning tales. You need hard evidence before you make any decisions." I shook my head. "I saw them together. What more evidence do I need? For yourself? Nothing. But for a divorce, for custody, you need more." Marianne's eyes hardened. "I made the mistake of confronting my ex-husband without proof. He turned it all around on me, made me doubt myself. I won't let that happen to you." Her words sent a chill through me. "What should I do?" "Dig deeper," she said firmly. "Get into his email, his bank statements, follow him if you have to, and don't let on that you know anything." The thought of pretending everything was normal made me sick. "I don't know if I can face him." Marianne squeezed my hand. "You can, and you will, for Lily and for that baby you're carrying. They deserve better, and so do you." As I drove home, Marianne's advice echoed in my mind. Could I really play the role of the unsuspecting wife? The thought of Chris touching me, kissing me, while I knew about Angela made my skin crawl. But as I walked into our house, the house we'd chosen together, filled with memories and dreams, resolve steeled my spine. I would do whatever it took to protect my children and myself. That evening, when Chris came home, I forced myself to greet him with a smile. "Hi, honey. How was work?" The relief on his face was palpable. It was, "Good. Nora, can we talk?" I nodded, my heart racing. "Of course." We sat on the couch, an ocean of unspoken words between us. Chris took a deep breath. "About what happened at the picnic, it was a horrible mistake. Angela means nothing to me. You and Lily are everything." I wanted to scream, to throw his lies back in his face. Instead, I said softly, "I overreacted. I've been so emotional with the pregnancy. Can we just start over?" The hope that bloomed in Chris's eyes made me want to vomit. He pulled me into a hug, murmuring apologies and promises. Over his shoulder, my eyes fell on a framed photo of us with Lily, my beautiful, innocent daughter, my unborn child. They deserved the truth, whatever it might be. In that moment, I made my decision. I would play along, gather evidence, and when the time was right, I would bring it all crashing down. As Chris held me, thinking all was forgiven, I began to plan. I would leave no stone unturned, no secret unexposed. And when I was done, Chris and Angela would regret ever underestimating me. The game was on, and I intended to win. The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the forgiving wife perfectly, all while gathering evidence with Marianne's help. We combed through bank statements, tracked Chris's movements, and even hired a private investigator. One rainy afternoon, Marianne and I huddled over my laptop, sifting through the latest batch of information from the PI. "Look at this." Marianne pointed to a series of transactions. Regular withdrawals, always the same amount, always on Fridays. My heart sank. The day he claims to work late. Marianne squeezed my hand. "We've got him, Nora. Now we just need the final piece of evidence." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the PI. "Meeting confirmed. Sending location now." I stood up, adrenaline coursing through me. "This is it. I'm going." Marianne looked concerned. "Are you sure? I could go instead." I shook my head. "No, I need to see this with my own eyes." The drive to the motel was a blur. Rain lashed against the windshield, matching the storm in my heart. I parked across the street, my eyes fixed on room 12. At exactly 7 p.m., a familiar car pulled up. Chris stepped out, looking around furtively before knocking on the door. Angela answered, pulling him inside. I felt numb. Even after everything, a part of me had hoped it wasn't true. I raised my phone, capturing video of Chris entering the room. Suddenly, a tap on my window made me jump. It was the PI, gesturing for me to roll down the window. "Mrs. Thompson, I've got audio set up in the room. Do you want to listen?" I hesitated, then nodded. He handed me a small device with headphones. Chris's voice came through clearly. "I can't keep doing this, Angela. Nora's pregnant." I need to focus on my family. Angela's laugh was cold. Oh, please, you've been saying that for months. Face it, Chris, you're not happy with her. You never have been. That's not true, Chris protested weakly. Then why are you here? Angela challenged. There was a long pause, then the unmistakable sound of kissing. I ripped off the headphones, bile rising in my throat. I'd heard enough. As I drove home, my mind raced. I had all the evidence I needed now. But what would I do with it? Marianne was waiting when I got back. One look at my face told her everything. Oh, honey, she said, pulling me into a hug. I'm so sorry. As I recounted what I'd seen and heard, Marianne's expression hardened. He doesn't deserve you, Nora. It's time to take back your life. But how? I asked, feeling lost. A quiet divorce? Try to keep it civil for Lily's sake? Marianne shook her head. No. Men like Chris, they need to be exposed. Publicly. It's the only way they learn. Her words ignited something in me. Years of suppressed anger, of putting everyone else first, of dimming my own light. It all came rushing to the surface. You're right, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. No more hiding. No more pretending. It's time everyone knew the truth. Marianne smiled, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. That's my girl. Now let's plan this out properly. We want maximum impact. As we strategized late into the night, a part of me wondered if this was too far. Was public humiliation really the answer? But then I thought of Lily, of the baby I was carrying. I thought of all the women who had been in my shoes, who had suffered in silence. No more. It was time to reclaim my voice, my power, my life. As Marianne and I finalized our plan, I felt a mix of exhilaration and terror. In just a few days, everything would change. There was no going back now. I placed a hand on my growing belly, whispering a promise. We're going to be okay. Mama's going to make sure of it. The annual neighborhood block party was in full swing. Families mingled, kids ran around with sticky faces, and the air was thick with the smell of barbecue. I stood on the periphery, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Marianne appeared at my side, a reassuring presence. Are you ready? I nodded, unable to speak. In my hand, I clutched a USB drive containing all the evidence of Chris and Angela's affair. Photos, videos, bank statements, everything. Chris was at the grill playing the role of perfect husband and neighbor. Angela hovered nearby, laughing too loudly at his jokes. The sight of them together made my blood boil. Remember, Marianne whispered, wait for my signal. I watched as she made her way to the makeshift stage where the karaoke machine was set up. She tapped the microphone, drawing everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Marianne announced, we have a special presentation from our very own Nora Thompson. This was it, my moment of truth. As I walked to the stage, Chris caught my eye. He smiled, oblivious to what was about to happen. I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I really going to do this? Then I saw Angela place her hand on Chris's arm, and my resolve hardened. I plugged in the USB drive and grabbed the microphone. I have a story to tell you all, I began, my voice shaky but gaining strength. A story about betrayal, lies, and the importance of truth. The crowd fell silent, sensing the gravity in my tone. Chris's smile faltered. For months I've been living a lie, I continued, pretending everything was fine while my husband carried on an affair with our neighbor. Gasps rippled through the audience. Chris's face drained of color. Angela tried to slip away, but Marianne blocked her path. I have proof, I said, pressing play on the first video. Chris and Angela's voices filled the air, discussing their secret meetings. The crowd watched in stunned silence as image after image appeared on the screen. Chris entering the motel. Bank statements showing his withdrawals. Text messages full of intimate details. I locked eyes with Chris. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was too stupid, too trusting? He started towards the stage. Nora, please. No, I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my voice. You don't get to speak now. You've done enough talking behind my back. As the evidence continued to play, I saw the reactions around me. Shock, disgust, pity. Angela had collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Chris stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. But then I heard a small voice. Mommy? Lily stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. My triumph turned to ash in my mouth. What had I done? I stumbled off the stage, pushing past the murmuring crowd to reach my daughter. As I scooped her up, I caught sight of Chris. The devastation on his face mirrored my own. Nora, he choked out, I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk? But it was too late. The damage was done. As I carried Lily away from the chaos, Marianne caught up with us. "You did it, Nora. You showed them all." "No," I cut her off, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. This wasn't right. Not like this. Marianne's expression hardened. "Don't go soft now. He deserved this." I looked at Lily, clinging to me in confusion, then back at the devastation I'd left behind. Maybe he did, but Lily didn't, and neither did I. As we walked away from the party, the sounds of shock and gossip fading behind us, I realized the bitter truth. In my quest for revenge, I'd hurt the very people I was trying to protect. The triumph I'd imagined felt hollow. Instead of closure, I was left with a gnawing question. What do I do now? The days following the block party were a blur of tears, hushed conversations, and sleepless nights. Chris moved out, staying with a friend. I was left alone with Lily, trying to explain why Daddy wasn't home. One afternoon, as Lily napped, I sat in my makeshift art studio, staring at a blank canvas. For the first time in years, I felt the urge to paint. As I picked up a brush, there was a knock at the door. It was Chris, looking haggard and remorseful. "Can we talk?" I nodded, letting him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the weight of our broken marriage between us. "I'm so sorry, Nora," Chris began, his voice cracking. "What I did was unforgivable. I understand if you want a divorce." I took a deep breath. I thought I did, but seeing Lily's face that day, it made me realize revenge isn't the answer. Chris looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we owe it to Lily and to this baby." I placed a hand on my swollen belly, "to try and work through this. But things have to change, Chris. I won't be taken for granted again." We talked for hours, laying everything bare. Chris's insecurities about providing for the family, my resentment at giving up my art, the breakdown in our communication. It was painful, but cathartic. "I want to go to counseling," I said firmly. "Both of us, together and separately, and I'm going back to painting. It's not negotiable." Chris nodded eagerly. "Anything you want. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." As we talked, I felt a shift within me. The anger that had consumed me for so long began to ebb, replaced by a sense of empowerment. I wasn't just Chris's wife or Lily's mother. I was Nora, artist, woman, survivor. Weeks turned into months. Chris threw himself into therapy, taking on more responsibilities at home. I set up a proper studio and started selling my paintings online. Slowly, we rebuilt trust. One evening, as we tucked Lily into bed, she asked, "Are you and Daddy happy now?" I looked at Chris, seeing the man I fell in love with, changed but somehow stronger. "We're working on it, sweetie, every day." As her due date approached, Nora found herself in her studio, working on a new piece. It was a self-portrait, not the meek housewife she'd become, but the strong, resilient woman she'd discovered. Chris appeared in the doorway, a mug of tea in hand. "That's incredible, Nora. It's so you." I smiled, really smiled for the first time in months. "It is, isn't it?" He set the tea down and wrapped his arms around me, careful of my belly. "I'm so proud of you, and grateful you gave us another chance." I leaned into him, feeling our baby kick. "We've both changed, Chris. This isn't the life I imagined, but maybe it's the one we needed." As I put the finishing touches on my self-portrait, I realized that this, the messy, complicated, beautiful life we were rebuilding, was my masterpiece. The next day, I received an email from a gallery in the city. They wanted to feature my work in an upcoming show. As I shared the news with Chris, watching his face light up with genuine pride, I knew we'd be okay. Not perfect, but okay. That night, as we lay in bed, Chris's hand on my belly, I thought about the journey we'd been on. The pain, the betrayal, the near destruction of everything we'd built. But I also thought about the strength I'd found, the voice I'd reclaimed. I wasn't just Chris's wife or Lily's mother anymore. I was Nora Thompson, artist, survivor, woman reborn. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I knew I had the strength to face them, not just for my family, but for myself. The canvas of our life wasn't perfect. It had its dark spots, its messy streaks, but it was ours, and it was beautiful in its own way. And I, Nora Thompson, was the artist holding the brush.